I just want to help you guys understand a little bit about the surveying process, what the two different main surveys do for your clients, how they protect them, how they don't protect them, so that way when your clients ask you a question, you at least know where to get the resources for them to be able to do the research, and then you yourself are also educated. So again, if anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me throughout the course, and we'll just kind of go through real quickly the two different types of surveys. Honestly, there's about a dozen different types, but the two main ones that you guys are used to discussing and seeing are the surveyor's real property report, which on your title and survey work order forms that you guys have through SLAR and through your online forms, that would be considered your spot survey. Dennis, it used to be called mortgage inspection report. They went away from that a long time ago. So it is the surveyor's real property report, or the spot. And then the other type is the boundary survey, or you guys call it the stake survey. Dennis, did you have a question?
Oh, I was just going to say I dated myself, as usual.
That's okay. We all know you're old. It's all right. Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the surveyor's real property report. So according to Missouri state law, well, let's see here if I can get this to, there we go. According to Missouri state law, there are certain requirements. And what I want to talk to you guys about today are the requirements that is in the law. So regardless of whether you get a survey from my company, from another company, we all have the same rules that we have to follow. So all of these things that we're going to talk about today should be synonymous for any company that you're using, but I just want you guys to know some things to look for. So according to the law, you can only get a spot survey on a residential single-family detached dwelling. And what that means is if you have somebody living on the other side of the wall that you share commonly, you cannot get a spot. So if you're only buying half of a villa, half of the townhouse, anything at all that's attached, you cannot get a spot unless you're purchasing the entire building. So if you're purchasing a duplex and you're only going to live in one unit, but you own the other half of the unit, then you can get a spot. If it's a triplex, you can still get a spot if you're purchasing the entire thing, or if it's a fourplex, as long as you're purchasing that entire building. The only exception to that is if you have to enter a door to get to a hallway to get to your unit, that is considered commercial property. And by law, you cannot get a spot on something that's commercial, institutional, industrial, or multifamily that has that common entranceway. So this is what a typical spot looks like. You're going to have a lot of these key ingredients, and I'm going to just briefly go through the list so that you guys know what to look for. So the first thing are property line dimensions. Every single property line should have a dimension. It tells you how big the lot is. Monumentation. Monuments are rebar, iron pipes, crosses, cotton spindles. There's a whole variety of different things that the state tells us we're allowed to use for property corners. And I can tell you that this is probably the #1 area where most survey companies, if they're going to miss something, this is what they're going to miss. According to law, when we do a spot, we are required to find 2 property corners. Now those property corners don't necessarily have to be on our lot. They can be on a neighboring lot. They can be on a lot across the street. They can be on a lot 10 houses down. As long as it's part of our subdivision, mathematically we can figure out where those property corners are in relationship to our property. But the law says that I have to show you on the drawing what 2 corners I found and where I found them at. And if I don't find 2 property corners, I have to tell you that, and I have to recommend a boundary survey. So there are companies out there, if they're not telling you where the survey monuments are, then they're not following the law and the requirements of a surveyor's real property report. But again, both of those should be shown on the drawing. Anything that's permanent in nature should be shown on the drawing, such as the house. Other things that are permanent in nature would be a shed located on a concrete pad. Now, if you just have a shed on your property, we're not going to show it because you can pick it up and move it. But if there's a concrete pad or if there's If it's built up on landscape timbers or something permanent of nature, we're going to show it on the drawing, because even if you move that shed, the concrete or the landscaping timbers or whatever is still going to remain in its location. So that would be considered a permanent structure. As far as pools go, an in-ground pool is absolutely a permanent structure. An above-ground pool is fairly subjective. And the way we determine whether or not we're going to show an above-ground pool is whether or not there is something permanent around that pool. As much of a pain as it may be, you can drain the pool, take it down, and move it. But if you have something like a deck that has concrete piers or supports, that is considered to be a permanent structure, so the pool would be shown in that instance. You're also going to find the setbacks and easements. The setbacks would be those building lines that the county says we have to put our house behind. The reason those exist is so that you don't have one house right up against the curb and one way far in the back of the lot. It just makes it more aesthetically pleasing as you're driving down the street. And it makes it so that everybody's kind of centered in their lots. They all have similar, front yards and backyards as far as the sizes are concerned. And then the easement, again, that's going to be someplace where the utility companies are allowed to run electric lines, water lines, gas lines. An easement is not someplace where your neighbor can put their sprinkler heads. It is not for private use. That is for public utility use as a general whole for the easement. You're also going to have the posted address. Reason we want to always put this on here is because mistakes happen. Somebody may put, Elm Street instead of Elm Avenue. Those are two completely different properties. The house number doesn't always match what the assessor has on their records. So we're going to always put that house number and tell you if it's posted, because we want to make sure everything matches up and that the title company is issuing insurance and issuing a deed for the correct property. Of course, you're always going to have a north arrow and a scale. And then the biggest other thing that you should look for on this sheet is the dimensional accuracy. Ours happens to be in a little note right down here at the bottom. Because on a surveyor's real property report, we are not verifying the property corners to be correct. There's going to be error between those monuments. In this example that I have right above West Cardigan, there's a 75-foot number. So the distance between those two rebar is supposed to be 75 feet. Well, if I happen to measure 76 feet between it, that means there's 1 foot of error. And this dimensional accuracy note should say 1 foot of error. In this instance, we found it to be accurate within 1/10 of a foot, so your accuracy note is 1/10 of a foot. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, so now what we're going to do is focus on this bottom part of the drawing, and I want to draw your attention to this paragraph that's right here, because this is the one thing that is really going to set apart what a spot is versus what a boundary is. So according to Missouri state law, I am not allowed to even have the word survey anywhere on that drawing. And there are two exceptions. One exception is if it's part of my company's name. So Cardinal Surveying, I'm allowed to have it on that drawing in that specific spot. There's also a specific statement that is required by law to be on this drawing. And in two places in that statement, it says the word survey. This is what the statement says. And this is required of every company to be on every spot. And this will really tell you how the state of Missouri feels towards this product. So it says the report was conducted by a land surveyor under his immediate personal supervision. The drawings are a representation of the conditions that were found at the time of the inspection. This does not constitute a property boundary survey and is subject to any inaccuracies that a subsequent boundary survey may disclose. So it says right there that this is not a survey. No property corners were set, and the drawings should not be used or relied upon for the future establishment of any fence, structure, or other improvement. Which means if your home buyer is planning on putting on a deck, or they want to build a shed, or they want to put up a fence, they cannot use a spot to get their permits, or to get permission, or to be able to know what it is that they own to put those items up on the property. And then, of course, there's no warranty of any kind to the present or future owners or occupants. And the reason being is because we don't know if the corners are right, and there's going to be error. And again, that statement is required to be on every single surveyor's real property report that's performed in the state of Missouri. The other things that you should look for, of course, you should have the name and information of the company that did the product. And then, of course, you've always got the licensed surveyor seal. This is what tells you that this was done by a licensed professional and that it is according to Missouri state statutes for the surveyor's real property report. Does anybody have any questions about the spot? Okay, so I'm going to give you a different example to look at. So part of what the surveying community is doing to try and make it easier for you guys to be able to read and interpret these documents, because there's a lot of information on here, and if you don't know what to look for, you can easily miss something. A lot of companies in the St. Louis area are going to color drawings, and in that, anytime there's any kind of issue or concern or something that we feel that you should be aware of, we're starting to put all those notes in red. So on this particular drawing, you can see that there's a red note on the right-hand side that says that the carport is located over the building line. Now this house, the main house itself, sits behind the building line. And this house is probably about 60, 65 years old. The title company has taken the stance that they're not concerned about the building line because it's just a carport. What they didn't take into consideration was that the intention of the buyers on this particular property was to convert that carport into a fully enclosed garage. When they did that, they changed the use of the property, and they were required to meet the 30-foot building line, which is over on the north side of the property. That made it very difficult for them to enclose the garage and to be able to actually use that space, because now their space went from 14 feet down to about 11 feet. Obviously, really, hampers their use of the property. So in the contract, when you guys are writing your contract, you've got 10 days to do your inspections, and then there is a blank line for you to write how many days your client has to get their survey done and completed. By default, it's 25 days if you don't change it. It just so happened they did not order the survey prior to the 25 days, and because they did not put in their contract that this was contingent on the availability or the ability to be able to enclose this carport, they missed their deadline date, and they had to file a variance with the county in order to be able to receive permission to enclose that. The bottom line is, since they couldn't go back to the sellers and say, hey, we want you guys to handle this because it's before our 25 days, our buyers had to take that on. And with that, the county required over $1,000 worth of work from surveying companies, architects. They actually even had to get an engineer involved, and they had to do a bunch of paperwork to request a variance for them just to get permission to enclose this. So that didn't even include the construction costs. That was just for the permission. Had they had that survey back before the 25 days, then they could have requested that the sellers make this happen for them. It could have saved them that money, the time, the aggravation. Does anybody have any questions about this?
Shelly, I might make a comment, though. I mean,
okay. So there's really two purposes. Yes.
I was just going to say, you pointed out the 25 days, and something else that I've noticed that others may have noticed, and I would caution everyone. I think sometimes title companies, including investors, because this happened at investors, I think they believe they're doing your clients a favor. If you tell them if your client orders a boundary survey, I think they feel like, some of the processors feel like they're doing your client a favor by not ordering that survey right away and waiting instead for the title work to come in, just so that if there's an immediate title issue, which today there's a lot of with short sales and all that, that the buyer's not out the cost of the survey as well. And however, that could burn up your 25 days. And I had that happen on a deal. I had that almost happen on a deal on Yale that Shelly did the survey on. My buyer, at the same time, it's one form. She did the title order and the survey order all in one form at the beginning of the deal. And, I thought I did my part. I turned it in and ordered the title and the survey right away. So we had, our full 25 days or 24 days of it. And it wasn't until, I was realizing this time was getting close, and I started following it up because I know Shelly and her company is usually, pretty quick on the turnaround times on these. I mean, it takes time to do these surveys, but still, the turnaround time is usually pretty quick. Anyway, long story short, I found out very close to my 25-day period being up that the survey had just been ordered recently because the processor, who again meant well, took it upon herself to wait until the title commitment itself came back and then ordered the survey. And we ended up with, we received the survey from Shelly, I think on we received it a day or two before the 25-day contingency was up, and there were 3 or 4 encroachments that had to be dealt with. So anyway, my point on this is that I know that's one of the time periods it's easy to maybe not pay a lot of attention to, but and there wasn't any, I might add too, on this property, it wasn't like there was anything obvious. We weren't necessarily expecting a problem. So you just may want to make sure that just like you make sure that the title commitment gets ordered and the appraisal gets ordered and all that, you might want to make sure that the survey gets ordered as well. That's the only thing I was going to add. So back to you, Shelly.
Well, and keep in mind too, I don't actually get a copy of your a copy of your contract. The only thing that I receive is that survey work order form. And the reason we even get that is because by law, if I have that piece of paper in my possession, I can't be held guilty of trespassing. So that's why we have the form. Excuse me. But I don't know any of your dates. I don't know when the contract was accepted. I don't know when the 25-day deadline is. I don't know when it's closing. I don't know any of that unless the title company happens to convey that information to me. And on top of that, I don't even know who's ordering the survey because your name and your company name are nowhere on that form. So if I had questions, I would have to go back to the title company to be able to have any kind of communication. So if you guys have a special request, if you have a buyer who wants to be there when we're doing the survey, that's something that you really need to communicate directly to the surveyor because, again, I have no idea who's ordering it. I don't know what your deadline dates are. And obviously, we want to get it back to you as quickly as possible so that if there are potential issues, you can address them. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on and let's talk about boundary surveys. So you know about the spots, and I will tell you there are really 2 main purposes for a spot. One is to prove that there is a house on the lot, and I can tell you that we've actually done, in our 10 years, about half a dozen surveys where we've proved that structures that we thought were on our lot were not on our lot, and we actually proved one time that a house was built on the wrong lot. And this was a house that had been conveyed 6 times, and it had never been caught before. The second purpose of the spot is to prove and show where the easements are located. It can save you from having an easement run right down through the middle of your house. Now, your average cost on a spot is about $150 to $175. So it's fairly inexpensive, but again, it does give you some kind of an idea of where the house is located in relationship to the property line. So on the boundary survey, boundary survey requirements are much more intense than what the spot is. So we are going to show everything that we do on the spot, except for we're going to do it on steroids, which means that there's going to be a whole bunch of additional items that we're going to have to do. Now, our company does a boundary survey, our drawings, a little bit differently than a lot of companies in St. Louis, in that we actually prepare 2 sheets to our drawings. Sheet number 1, you're actually looking at sheet number 2 here, but sheet number 1 looks very similar to the spot page. But sheet 2 proves that we did due diligence and that we did what the state laws say we have to do. And what the state law says is that we have to give you the reference data, which would be the subdivision where we pulled all of our records from. We have to tell you what sheet number it is, and we have to have the accuracy standard. Missouri state law says if you have a 1/4 acre lot, you're allowed to have as much as 1/10 of error. If you have a 3 acre lot, you can have 3/10 of error. But it gives us all of our rules as far as how far our monuments are allowed to be in the wrong place and they're still acceptable. So all of that information has to be on that drawing. And then we have to tell you if there are errors between the property corners. We also have to tell you who all the neighbors are. Now, I'm not going to give you their names and phone numbers, but we're going to give you the legal data regarding those properties. So a little bit of a blow up. Part of the requirement is that we have to locate every single property corner. If that corner happens to not be there, we're required to set a new property corner there. Those monuments are typically going to be an 18-inch long rebar, iron pipe, cotton spindle, or cut cross. So at every single one of our corners, you're going to see a monument. All of these other monuments, these are all the information that we use to figure out where our lot is located. A boundary survey is like doing a giant puzzle, and you have to know where all the outside pieces of the puzzle go first before you can put that middle piece in. Well, that middle piece is our property. So we have to make sure that everybody around us is correct so that we can be correct. So here's that sheet 1. Looks very similar to a spot, except for you're going to notice at the bottom of the drawing that big, ugly, nasty paragraph is not here saying that it's not a survey. But there are a lot of extra things that we do have to show on this page. Biggest thing being, we are required to show all the improvements, not just the house and the shed, but we're also required to show the fences, retaining walls, and anything that's close to the property lines that could be an indicator of who believes they own that property. So we're going to blow this up a little bit so that we can take a closer look. Remember, things in red are things that you should be paying special attention to because they may be an issue. And they may not just be an issue for your buyer, but when your buyer goes to sell this house, hopefully they're going to call you back and you're going to be the listing agent on it. It's going to be something that you might have to deal with then if you don't deal with it when your buyers are purchasing the property. So along the right side of the property, oops, sorry about that. Along the right side of the property, subject property fence. We are the subject property. So that's our fence. And it says it's located onto the adjoining property. The adjoining property is any property that joins up next to us. So this is our fence located onto the neighbor's property for a length of 56.3 feet. So the distance from here all the way to the back is 56.3 feet. What you really want to be concerned about are these numbers located right above the arrows, the leaders. This says that the fence is located 0.0 feet over the property line. So this one is right on the property line. But we built our fence a little bit crooked, and the further we go towards the back of the lot, the further onto our neighbor's lot the fence goes. And it goes onto the neighbor's lot by 0.1 feet. That's the equivalent of 1 inch and 1/5 of an inch. So it's minuscule in the big picture of things. But keep in mind, when we're doing our measuring, we are measuring to 0.02 feet of accuracy. And 1/10 of a foot is a big amount when you're comparing that to hundredths of a foot. So along the back property line, we've got subject property fence located on the subject property by 2/10 of a foot. That means that our fence is on our property. Perfect. Black note, you don't need to worry about it. On the left side, subject property fence located onto the subject property. So that's our fence located onto our property. But if you look, you can see the magenta line, which is the fence, versus the black line, which is the property line. And there is a 1-foot gap between that fence and the property line. So when you come out your back door and you stand on your porch and you look into your backyard, you can see what you think you own, because everybody thinks they own up to the fence. And that, of course, naturally, who owns on the other side of your fence? Well, your neighbor does. So this guy over here thinks he probably owns all the way up to the back of our fence. He's mowing it, he's maintaining it, but we're paying taxes for it. We have legal rights to this 1-foot strip of land. The problem comes into play in about 10 years, when all of a sudden this neighbor says, you know what, I've been mowing this grass for 10 years, I've been taking care of this property, I believe this is my property, I've been treating it like it's my property, and I'm going to take you to court, and I'm going to claim adverse possession, and the court system is going to look at my evidence, and they're going to say, you've met all the criteria, here's your land for free. And they don't have to pay us for it, they don't have to compensate us for it. We take a loss in square footage of our lot, we take a loss from the taxes that we've paid over all the years, and this land now becomes his. So the whole point of getting the boundary survey is to make it known what you own. People know where the house is, they know what the house looks like, but remember, part of that purchase of that property is not just the structure, but it's also the land that comes along with that. And you want to make sure that you're utilizing all of your land. And if you're not utilizing it, that's fine. We want to make sure that this neighbor over here knows, hey, really, we own about a foot outside of our fence. We're not planning on moving it, but we just wanted to let you know that our fence is kind of in the wrong place. And at some point in time, if we decide to fix the fence or take it down or put up a new fence, we might put it back over on the property line. That way, this neighbor over here can't claim adverse possession. As soon as you inform them that you own that land, they no longer have the legal rights to it. And the easiest way to do that is to send a certified letter via the post office to the neighbor with a copy of the survey, because that little green card comes back to you, and that's your proof that you've given him notification. And again, he can no longer claim that 10 years of continual use, which is required by the state of Missouri. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, I want to real quickly just give a little bit of a plug for our website. There are a lot of things on our website that would be very easy for you guys to access, have at your fingertips. And one of the things that's on there is an article that was put in the Post-Dispatch, and it's about, can you find your own yard? And I know it sounds kind of like a silly title, but the bottom line is most people don't know what they own. They think they own up to the fence. They think they own up from where the grass grows from, you know, brown to green, or where they've always mowed to. It's not an indicator of property ownership. That just means that's where you're maintaining to. But there's all kinds of resources on our website. As soon as you go on to cardinalsurveying.com, right at the top there are 3 buttons. One's I'm a homeowner, I'm a realtor, or I'm with a title company. If you click on those buttons, they'll lead you to the right resources so that you guys have access to all those documents that can help your buyers in the future know exactly what it is that they're buying, what they're getting themselves into, you know, what an easement is, what happens if you have a property in a flood zone. All of those resources are right there at your fingertips.
Hey, Shelly.
All right. Dennis, how we do? Yeah.
This is Patty. And to go back 1 second on that adverse possession, on the survey, does it count that clock starts from when you bought the property, or as long as, like, if there were previous owners that, like, put up fencing, would it start back then? When does that timeline start?
That time starts as far back as you can get proof. So if the previous owner happens to be a cousin of yours and they lived in the house for 25 years, you can tag on to their time frame and their timeline as long as you can prove it. So you could go back 5 owners, and if you can prove continual use of that property and they're willing to testify to that, then you can count that time as well. It is not by individual, it's just continual use on the property.
Okay, and I guess I'm looking at it from the other side of it, because as you always, you know, recommend to folks, prior to purchasing the property, they should get the stake survey. And, you know, some of us agents think we know better than others, and we don't get stake surveys until after the property was purchased, and then go to and then find out that, guess what, you own property that's in their fence line, et cetera, et cetera. So the burden of proof is on you to see how long their fence line had been put up, or, I mean, how does that work?
So the person who is claiming adverse possession is the person who has to prove the timeline.
Okay. Okay. If you're trying to get your property back.
So the burden of proof, right, the burden of proof falls on the person that's trying to take the land.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, my dear.
Okay. Absolutely. Anybody else? Dennis, how are we doing on time? Are you wanting me to stop? You want me to go through one where we did a spot and then we went back out and did a boundary and see the differences? How are we doing?
Yeah, if you could maybe wrap up in maybe the next 5 minutes or so, that'd leave us time to do the rest of the stuff we've got to do. But I mean, this is really good info. So I think if you could tie the two together, and that'd be great. Just kind of show the difference and the reason, if you recommend the stake over the spot, why. So.
Sure. Okay, so we're going to go through one example real quickly, and I've got a lot of examples, and if any of you guys ever want to get together, if you want to go through things, if you want me to do more education, I'm happy to do that for you. All you need to do is just shoot me an email. I'd love to get together for coffee and make sure that you guys understand the process. Obviously, we don't expect you guys to be experts, but we want to make sure that you feel equipped to best service your clients. So, all right, so this example that we're going to look at is on Jackson Street. Now, across the street from us, we found iron pipes, and this is located on lot number 10, block number 1 of Dick's addition to the city of St. Charles. So when we're doing the spot, we are basing all of our information off of lot dimensions and deeded information provided by the title company in that title commitment. In that title commitment, it said that we are lot number 5 in block 3 of Dick's addition, and that we had a lot width of 50 feet by 119 feet, 8.5 inches. So when we did the spot the first time, and just so you guys know, I've just cropped this a little bit so that you can actually see some of the dimensions and numbers a little bit larger, but right down here at the bottom, we do have that nasty paragraph saying that it's not a boundary survey. The results from using those 2 iron pipes across the street prove that our garage is about a foot away from the property line. We've got 8.5 feet here, and we're about 21 feet away from the front property line. So this is the spot. The accuracy on this was plus or minus half of a foot. A few years after we did the spot, somebody new purchased the property. We happened to do the survey again. This time the client decided to get a boundary survey done. So we went to do the boundary survey. And again, keeping in mind that a boundary survey is that giant puzzle, we actually had to find lots of survey monuments to determine where our lot was located. So again, we're lot number 5 right here in the middle. We found property corners all the way down in the block to the south of us, all the way up along the right-of-way, down the back alleyway. And what we started to find was that things were not making sense. All of the deeds around us said that our lot depth should have been 125 feet. And keep in mind, our deed said 119 feet, 8.5 inches. So something wasn't adding up. And what we ended up finding was that there was a deficiency of 5 feet in our deed. Keep in mind, this is the city of St. Charles. Those properties had been deeded for 80 years. This had never been caught before, that the dimensions on all the lots in the rest of the block didn't match our lot. And when we did the spot the first time, we're basing it on deeded information, and we're not confirming. Again, the difference of $150 versus the boundary survey, which was $450. So we found that deficiency with the lot. At this point, we're past our 25-day deadline because, for whatever reason, it didn't get done before the 25 days. And there was a problem with the title company being able to insure the property. They could insure the 50 foot by 119 feet, but they couldn't insure 125 feet for a depth of the lot because the chain of title had never said it was supposed to be 125 feet. So what ended up happening was they took the survey drawings down to the county, to the assessor's office, and said, here's what the survey has found and is proved, and we need to, make this right with the assessor, with the lot dimensions, so that we can re-record the deed to have it be correct. And the assessor said, okay, we agree with the data that the surveyors provided, but now we want to know who's going to pay the back taxes for that 5-foot by 50-foot strip of land that existed that nobody's been paying taxes on for the past 80 years. Obviously, that delayed closing some because there was no way that the seller wanted to pay 80 years worth of back taxes on a 50-foot by 5-foot strip of land. Our buyers obviously did not want to incur that burden themselves, but they were past their 25 days, so there really wasn't a whole lot they could do. What ended up happening was they delayed closing. I believe it was a total of 3 times. It closed approximately 90 days past the initial closing date. But what the county eventually concurred to or agreed to do was to waive the back taxes, but to reassess the lot according to the new lot size moving forward, which we were agreeable to. However, 90 days can really make or break somebody. Luckily, this was in a situation where they weren't that concerned about it, but we did have to do a new property description of which the title company then recorded at closing. Along with the whole 5-foot issue, we opened up a whole new can of worms, and those were fences. Again, looking at those red notes on the right side, you've got a neighbor over here, adjoining property fence located onto the subject property. So the neighbor's fence on us by over a foot. The bigger problem is over here on this side, subject property fence. So that's our fence located onto the adjoining property. Our fence on the neighbor's property, over 4 feet of our fence. We're using 4 feet of his land, and we have it fenced in. We're treating it like it's ours. Obviously, he has no clue what he owns, because if you look at his fence up here, this little decorative fence, he's got it located over 6 feet onto his property. So guess who's maintaining this strip right here? I can almost guarantee you we're mowing that grass. We think it's ours because he doesn't have it fenced in. Again, having the boundary survey done makes it so that you know exactly what it is you own. So with doing the boundary survey, we've now corrected the legal description so that it's 125 feet. Our garage location, this is kind of where the land was, quote, added, was in the back. It increased from a foot to over 5 feet. And of course, you've got all of that detail regarding the fences, landscaping, retaining walls, all of that's going to be shown on the boundary survey. So on the left side, this is what our spot looks like. Again, average cost $150 to $175. On the right, the boundary survey. You can anticipate a cost in a boundary survey being anywhere from about $350 to $550, just depending on the age of the subdivision, how large the lot is, how wooded the lot is. The older something it is, the harder it is to survey, the longer it takes. So the question that I have for you is, as an agent, which of these two products really protects your client's interests and makes it so that they're aware of what it is that they own, not only inside their 4 walls, but inside of all of their property lines?